Hey folks, my name's HardByte and I'm just making a short video on Necrolord Resto Druid. This is sort of done off the cuff as I've noticed there aren't that many Necro resources out there. Necrolord Resto Druid is our strongest covenant in Mythic Plus for Shadowlands Season 3. It's likely going to remain the same going into Season 4 unless there's some last minute balancing. So, what is Necrolord Resto Druid? We get our class spell of Adaptive Swarm, which puts hots and dots on enemies and friendlies that have 3 stacks and increase the effectiveness of all other hots and dots on those targets by 38% on my tooltip. It's 25 base, and then with our conduit, it goes up to 38 that we use. And after it expires, it then bounces to another target until its stacks run out. Now, the cool thing for us is our Unity Legendary gives us a bonus effect where every time Swarm expires, it actually has a 60% chance to split into 2 swarms with each jump. So we can actually ramp up our Swarm and start to get it ping-ponging all around enemies and friendlies and moving to the point where sometimes I've finished a key, I've gone to get a drink, I came back a minute later, and I see like our group of 5 just still has swarms bouncing everywhere. It's pretty fun. It can be terrifying if you're doing a stealth skip and you see these swarms flying like between, different targets. But yeah, usually it doesn't cause a problem. So, gear. You may notice I'm not doing what most resto druids do, which is to stack as much haste as humanly possible. Instead, I aim for 30% haste. Any lower feels quite bad. 30% is a nice sweet spot. And then I try to keep my verse at the moment, and I do plus 25 keys, so I'm not doing the highest of high keys. But I try to keep my verse around 10%. And then I aim for as much crit as possible. You'll also notice my mastery value is 0. The 4% is just our base mastery rating. This is because I don't like mastery because it's only for healing. Although if you do want to just heal, mastery is amazing for that. Haste mastery is really good for healing. But it gives us absolutely 0 damage. It just amps up our hots when we combine them. So instead, I run 2-set. So I only run shoulder because that's haste crit, and chest because that's haste verse. And this is partly because our 2-set is really strong and it's just free HPS. It's just an extra hot that we get when we rejuve. And our 4-set is every 3 Swiftments we turn into our Incarntree for 9 seconds. Again, it's quite powerful. It's amazing in raids, especially when you pair it with Convoke. It's exceptional there. But Swiftmend is our emergency spot heal. That's our, we get a Soul of the Forest empowerment. We want to pump a wild growth after it. I don't like having to hold Swiftmends or having to pace them out. I prefer just being able to send a Swiftmend, follow it up with a regrowth, a nature's swiftness regrowth if I really need to. That's basically a lay on hands for Druid on a 1 minute cooldown. So yeah, I like to keep Swiftmen free. I think the 4-set can impair you. However, there will be dungeons where if you're doing a plus 30, if you want like the 3 resto druids who do 30s, the tree might actually be a massive help in certain keys. I'm thinking like a Sanguine, especially third boss Sanguine, and first boss as well. So, putting some mastery in is not the end of the world. You're not going to brick your druid. As for Legos, I run Circle, which makes our dots and hots apply faster. So they last for shorter times, but do their full amount in that time still. And then obviously Unity. As for trinkets, I'm running the Resonant Reservoir because how could you not? And then I'm running an Unbound Changeling. So I've got a bit of leech on this, which is part of the reason. But I also like the crit amp, 521 crit. So I always crit food, even if I get the imp buff from normal food afterwards. But another option is also Solayas. So I have a 278 Solayas. I could just link to someone with crit as well if they're in my party and have more stable, consistent crit throughout. Again, it's likely a hair's width between these trinkets. I don't agonize over which one's best. Other than that, yeah, I just balance my gems. I have one crit gem just to hit that 30% haste or as close as I can. My cloak has avoidance, as I find that's the best for dealing with damage in dungeons. So, that's my setup. As for talents, if you already play Druid, which would be the only reason you'd be watching this video, or you're really bored, The only thing that might make you raise an eyebrow here is renewal. Don't worry, don't take it. You don't have to. All three of these talents are strong. All of them bring benefits. Dungeon by dungeon, you might want to change this round. All of that's completely fine. The reason I run renewal base, and I change this sometimes, is purely because I like to be able to have a personal 90-second cooldown healthstone that I can use in cat form. So if I'm on a boss like first boss Necrotic Wake, for example, and I get the spew on me, I also have my renewal macroed with Healthstone as well. So if I want to, I can just basically send myself back up to full health. If you take like a Wretch, you'll kick in your Frenzied Regen Conduit, and then the 60% heal with Renewal Soulstone will just top you completely. And if Warlocks aren't meta in Season 4, then happy days, you still have a Soulstone. Or Healthstone, sorry. We never need Soulstones, of course, because we never die. The rest of this is completely standard. And as I say, renewal is personal preference more than anything. I just like to be in Hearts of the Wild, Catweave, and not have to leave Catweave for anything when I'm dealing with single target or prio damage. So, let's get into our Soulbinds. First thing, just like those talents, you really don't have to obsess over your Soulbinds. There isn't one that's dominant over the others. The most common you'll find is Bonesmith. I run Bonesmith personally, and here's my argument for it. The access to just int for having enchanted gear, the access to more crit for landing crits, and the access to extra damage repeated by doing damage makes Bonesmith super brain dead. Makes it really straightforward to play. You don't really have to worry about, mechanically handling any of this tree. Madoleth is completely fine. It's a little more reliant on context, and the reason for that is Madoleth's solvent, which means whenever you fleshcraft, whoever you are around when you fleshcraft, whichever enemies, whichever corpses, etc., are around you, will give you different buffs based on the type of creature that you fleshcraft. So Beast will give you bonus intellect, for example. Humanoid gives you a different buff. Elemental will give you a different buff, etc., etc. Some of these are much better than others. Beast is the best, in my personal opinion, because it just gives you primary stats. But that means that there can be times you fleshcraft or certain dungeons you run where you have more or less access to those buffs. So you'd plan accordingly there. The rest of Madoleth, really cool. So ultimate form means when you fleshcraft, you become CC immune and you regen a bit of health. But the main thing is the CC immunity. This can be absolutely fantastic. If you are running a High Halls of Atonement key, and maybe you've got, a limited amount of decurses, although you are the druid, being able to fleshcraft and BCC immune, being able to avoid the knockback on first boss of Plaguefall and stay in the haste circle, these little things are really advantageous, and just that ability to plant your feet while getting a huge shield is super strong. And yeah, finally, the Oozling turns up, Kev's Oozling turns up and does a bit of damn and pure damn. That's pretty brain dead as well, so that's nice. So generally, Madoleth's pretty good. It's pretty straightforward. It's a little more active. You interact with it more, have to think about it more, but you do get some pretty strong benefits from that thought. As for Emily, finally, I will make this one quick. A little similar to Bonesmith, your starter Soulbind bonus is just primary stats. That's pretty straightforward. It's cool. Allies get some. They're happy. And the haste gain is, again, pretty cool. The only downside to the haste gain is it's after defeating enemies, so I don't really like the idea that, if you're killing a pack cleanly, you want that pack to be dying as close together as possible. So that means quite a few pulls. You'll have some downtime in those 10 seconds, unless you're really hyper chain pulling, but there's lots of pulls in dungeons that don't necessarily allow that as well. And it's only up to 15% haste, which, don't get me wrong, it's pretty good still. But it's not ginormous. And that's if you get, all 5 stacks. Pustule Eruption. Now, this is the reason I don't take Emily, even though I think it's one of the coolest abilities. When you fleshcraft, you get covered in pustules. It's a lovely, lovely ability. And then when you take damage or heal, you pop a pustule for every tick of that healing. And that radiates healing and damage around you. So this means you have to use your fleshcraft offensively So like the start of a pull usually, you know, and you got lots of targets to hit. And also you want to have a heal on yourself or be taking damage, which is a sentence I should never say. So it's just heavy on the cognitive load. It requires positioning, it requires pre-planning, and it also kind of requires you to potentially sacrifice your fleshcraft. You know, maybe you want to hold that fleshcraft for later in a pull or halfway through a boss fight, for example. So if you took, like, say, second boss Torvald of Sanguine Depths, if you fleshcraft on pull there, the first ad will just burn away your shield when you might actually want that fleshcraft to bear form fleshcraft. You know, the third castigate that overlaps with the ad damage, for example. So just the fact that it changes how we use our fleshcraft and adds a lot of mechanical complexity, I don't see M&E as being great value for money. So I run Bonesmith. The only thing you need to worry about here, everything is identical to any other Druid build, just to make sure you take Evolved Swarm. This amps up our Adaptive Swarm's empowerment of Hots and Dots by an extra 13%, so it goes from 25 to about 38%. Really, really strong, really effective. Everything else is standard. Finesse Conduits, you have complete freedom of choice in. For indoors dungeons, front of the pack is pretty competitive. Outdoors, I would say not so much, say Halls of Atonement, Necrotic Wake. Tireless Pursuit is valid as well. It's a nice little speed amp whenever you leave cat form. It can be quite handy. Not having any of these, I could just remove these, have them blank. It wouldn't really cost us a great deal. So yeah, and other than that, it's just our Frenzied Regen kicking in when we go low HP. Well-honed instincts, and then the increase to our bear form health and armor by 26%, which is awesome. That is a lot of HP on our druid. And yeah, if I just show you that, we have 69.8k health right now. We shift to bear form, we get 110k, and then when the benefit leaves, we go down to 87k. That is huge. That's over 20k bonus health, and we get armor on top of that as well. So if it's physical damage, we're super, super resilient. And that has no internal cooldown. That's just every time you shift into bear form as well. So you could spam it. You wouldn't be doing any damage, but if it was necessary, if you were taking, say, you know, chain shoots, for example, and, you know, you knew you were going to keep taking them, Hailers, for example, in Spires, it can really make you survive a few more hits. It's pretty cool. So, let's get into our rotation. You'll notice my uniframe has this sort of grid going around it. In the description on this video, I will put a link to a weak aura, which basically tries to calculate your best target for Adaptive Swarm. So the reason for this is Swarm, when we send it out, puts 3 stacks on a target. So if I cast this on myself, you'll see I've got this little 3 here, and I've got the Swarm on me. Now, when it spreads and moves, it's going to drop down to 2 stacks. I'm hoping it splits so you can see the Unity effect. I hate this game. So it's left me, and now it's on this training dummy with 2 stacks, which we can see here. Now, we don't want to put our Swarm when it's back on a target with no stacks. We want to put it on a target with 2 stacks, ideally. 3 stacks is fine as well. 4 or 5 stacks, you don't want to refresh it because you're not gaining that much. But the reason for this is, think of those 4 stacks that have just flown out. I hope my legendary hasn't broken. Think of these stacks that have flown out as dice rolls, right, or a coin toss. It's got a 60% chance. It's a waste of coin. Work with me here. It's got a 60% chance to split in 2 directions, which, there we go. Thank you, helpful citizen of Zuldazar. You have very appropriate names to show the split. So, the more stacks we have out, the heavier the stacks on an individual swarm that's bouncing around, the more coin tosses it gets to split. So we want to always keep those stacks high. That's more effective than having lots of low stacks out, because lots of low stacks are all close to despawning for good. We keep the stacks high, we keep the buff/debuff rolling. So I'll do this again. And for our rotation, all we want to do, if we are above 4 targets, so I'll demonstrate on these 5. If we're above 4 targets, we just want to keep our Sunfire and our Moonfire up. So, I have my mouse over spells on 2 and 3 in human form, or no form. So if I throw out, let's just do one more swarm, so you'll see I'm lit up again here. I'll start Sunfiring Getting these going. Starting to apply on Moonfire. I'll apply Moonfire here. I won't Sunfire this one, just because you can get a sense for timings. But you'll see quite comfortably, I'm kind of overwriting here, not fully going into my Pandemic. But I'm able to just upkeep these dots, and Moonfire especially is getting a bit silly now. Where I'm just refreshing needlessly. So just to demonstrate the time we have. Now I've got 4 stacks here. That Citizen's got 4, so we'll see where these spread to. This has gone 2 ways. So that one's got 3, it's gone up to 5. That's got 3. So I'm going to refresh this one with 3, which goes up to 5. And then I'm going to start Sunfiring, Moonfiring out again. And we just try to upkeep these dots. So the idea is, if I had more party members, if I had more things going on, we keep these swarms up between packs. We keep them moving as much as we possibly can. And then we just keep refreshing our dots. Now, if I just break combat, which might take forever, but you'll sort of see now, we've got 5 stacks, 3 stacks. That was 5 stacks. I think that was 3. Our Citizen has 2. I've got 5. We can top our Citizens up to 5. So you sort of see how many stacks we can start to get rolling. And these two can split. And they'll all be 4 stack debuffs then, once they go out. So see 4 stacks, 4 stacks, 4 stacks. That one's going to overwrite, unfortunately. But you'll see how we keep these values high. These each come out now and go into 3 stacks. Wow, I'm getting lots of wasted stacks coming out here. Wasn't part of the plan. They also get a bit out of control, flying wherever they can. And you'll see, without me casting on myself for a long time, I'm back to 5 stacks. Don't forget it's a heal as well. So if your whole party has adaptive swarm stacks on them, they're all getting healed, and all your hots are being amped up by 38% as well. It's really, really powerful. It's really cool. So I'm just going to fly away to try and despawn them and drop combat. That's the idea. Above 4 targets, we just chill, we just Sunfire, we just Moonfire, we keep it rolling, and we're all happy. Now, what we can also do here, if it's just 4 targets, let me watch to myself, we can get our Moonfires out, and then I'll usually Moonfire, refresh Sunfire, go Cat form, and then Rake. So if it's 4 targets or less, I'll just get my Rakes out, and then I can refresh. I also have mouse over click settings for these dummies, and you can keep these out and rolling. Now, obviously, we've got. I'll also spend my 5 points on a rip if it's available, and we just keep our huts going. And the idea is basically, because it's hot empowerment, we just. I'm doing this a little bit scuffed, but you can see our DPS is floating around sort of 9k ish with me. Not really concentrating, talking more than anything. And yeah, we're in a position where we're pretty chill. We're raking around. 4 targets is the hardest to maintain on. Don't worry if it falls off. If you have hots rolling, you know, you're doing pretty efficient damage. So my Sunfire's fallen off, so I'll refresh that. Get my Swarm back out. And swarm monitoring is probably one of your biggest challenges. You'll notice on my weak aura, my red bar underneath here is my swarm, so I can see when it's back up. I do also have bars at the bottom, but I try not to look at them. You'll also see I run the Halo, obviously. We can always send the Halo out to make our damage look more obscene than it is. So, that's a really, really scuffed version of 4 target. But you'll see it's very... It's very straightforward. We want our Sunfire, we want our Moonfire, and then we want our Rake 4 targets and lower to be up as much as possible on these targets, okay, to do as much damage as we can. And you'll see here, Moonfire dominates our damage. In a key, probably not this big a differential, because, you know, the bigger the pack, Sunfire just hits everything up to 20 targets. But Moonfire should be dominant. Moonfire should be high on your damage meter, okay? I will attach a link in the description as well to just an image, a screenshot of kind of like my overall breakdown in a 25 Gambit, where I got, I think it was 9.1k overall damage, playing this exact build, playing it just like this. But Moonfire should always be dominant. You want to use your Swarm off cooldown, and always try to hit a target that's got 2 to 3 stacks on it. Pop them up to 5, refresh the timer, and then just let them 5 stacks bounce around. By the time Swarm's back, there should be some 3 stack targets back out. Remember, that's allies or enemies as well, so you can mix between the two. It doesn't really matter which you prioritize because they're going to move anyway. Now, this is something it's awkward to sim, right? Because dungeon sims are always a little iffy. But Heart of the Wild as well. So if you're Heart of the Wilding, above 4 targets, in my opinion, you want to just maintain Sunfire and then swipe in Cat form. So no moon firing, just get those get that damage out in Cat form. You can Rake as well. I actually think Rake's completely fine. But what I like to do is swipe, and if there's a prio target, dump my combo points into that prio target. So I might Rake and Rip, and then go back to swiping, and then just drop in a bite onto the prio target. So shards in Halls of Atonement, the Stitch Vanguards in Necrotic Wake, etc., etc. As for single target, this is where we just go back to being a cat. We are cat. Cat is what we do. So, we want to sort of go in stealth. We want to get a Rake out, apply our Rip as fast as possible, get our dots going. We normally have Swarm bouncing anyway. Back to cat form. Get our Rip back up. Refresh Moonfire, and then Sunfire. Go back in. Rake. And then, yeah. At this point, we've got ours rolling. A mistake I see some druids make, all 6 druids who still play keys, is they wait for 5 stacks to apply their first Rip. That's bad practice. You want your Rip up as much as possible, especially because you should pretty much always have Swarm on this target. You want every dot you can get out ASAP. If you're Troll as well, you can get a bit of bonus haste, get a bit more energy regen, etc. And if there were no other targets involved, it's been a bit weird here. We should have Swarm with 100% uptime on this target here as well. And then that's our single target damage. So I've definitely lost a little bit of damage here. I'm not haloing as well. I've obviously got no group buffs, etc. I've got no food buffs going around. But you get the general idea. This damage will probably be like 1k, a little bit more higher if you impot, etc. And Swarm stays on. That might get up to 2k. So that's the single target, nice and straightforward. We have our 4 dots. If Rip is around, and this is a feel thing because it's going to be based on your haste and procs and what you've got in the group. Let's move away from that because that's noisy. You want to try to get a feel for, your build, your gear, and when you can get away with ferocious bites and still get Rips in there, because Rip still follows the rule of the more points you put into it, the more efficiency you get out of it. It's just for those first early Rips. If you're going in with 0 points, get a Rip out as soon as possible. Your stealth Rake, throw a quick Rip in, Sunfire, Moonfire, back to stealth, back to cat, sorry, couple of shreds, and then refresh that Rip. And then normally your Rake starts to run out around then as well. That first Rake is empowered by stealth. If you play Druid, you'll know that already. So don't overwrite that Rake. That's another mistake I see Druids do. They see it get to like 4 seconds in the window and think, oh, Pandemic, I should refresh that dot. It's like that's the one time you don't want to. If you've ever played Feral, you understand the importance of that as well. So that is a very generalized. I don't want to go into it too much more, but I'll also be recording my keys, and I will upload a video of me doing around the 23 to 25 key, putting this into practice. Obviously, I won't upload the ones with bad damage. I'll upload a great one, but I'll try to get one that properly captures the feel of playing through a key in a way that keeps the team alive and doesn't risk their lives. Because again, a dead DPS is way more of a damage loss than us refreshing Sunfire. But just so you can get an idea of that, put into practice. One last thing I will say is do not look at my keybinds. My weak auras, feel free to have a nose at. I could always share these if you want. But it's basically top left is Swiftmend, below it is Wildgrowth, sorry, because they're linked together with Soul of the Forest. And over on this side, grey is my Dispel, yellow is my Soothe, and red is my Covenant ability in there. And then just the most common abilities I use on the bottom row, along with my energy or mana. That just changes. I've made this myself. I just sort of knocked it up in a way that works for me. Down here is like a cursed wasteland of things I did when I started this game that are all bad habits and should never be done. I haven't ran Nourish since Castle Nathria for that one KT fight. You'll notice my trinket is on Q in standard form and jumps to F in cat form. Do not copy that. That is terrible practice. It's just how my brain works because I've broken it. But yeah, as a general gist, Sunfire, Moonfire above 4 targets. If you're 4 or fewer targets, then Sunfire, Moonfire, and Rake. 3 targets is much easier to maintain, 3 and 2 targets. If it's single target, then you also rip. You dump all 4 of your dots in and keep them maintained and up. And if you are in Heart of the Wild, and it's above 4 targets, if you are just swiping and then dumping combo points in while keeping Sunfire up, you're doing completely fine. Now, there might be optimizations, there might be actually efficiency in Rake, but I feel like if you're pulling like 10 mobs, you're not going to be able to rake 10 mobs and Sunfire the pack and just keep that running, and your 10th rake's going to be super late. That's an extreme example, but I feel like Swipe is maybe a marginal DPS loss on like 5-6 targets for much lower cognitive load. And remember, we're also potentially, healing, positioning, dealing with affixes like explosive at the same time. So just be cognizant of drop 5% damage on a pull. If it reduces your cognitive load by like 25%, you're going to make fewer mistakes, you're going to be sharper. And quite frankly, you'll probably make that damage back by, not getting hit by things you shouldn't or not missing things that you need to deal with. Healing an explosive going off is much less efficient than killing an explosive, for example. So feel free to ask any questions. If you think this was just a load of crap, I'm an idiot, feel free to tell me in the comments so I can delete the comments. No, but if there's anything here you disagree with or have questions about, feel free to ask away. Okay, so thank you for your time, and I hope it was helpful.